It's the red one. Red ivory. It's new. It's the red one, dude. It's the red one. It's the red ivory. Huh? I didn't pass mine. That's all we're going to do. All right. Well, I'm Josh, and I'm with the Ivory team. We'll be talking about Chapter 6 for Friedman. And to sum it up really easily, it's education equals the economy. The name of this chapter is Homework Times 2, the American Dream. And he sums it up, basically says, to maintain the American dream, we require that we have to learn, work, produce, and relearn, as well as innovating twice as hard, twice as fast, twice as often, and twice as much. So that's where we get homework times 2 equals the American dream. So some of the key themes that he hints on, although he doesn't say globalization once, he's comparing us to other countries and the way we work and the way they work as his main theme. He does talk about critical thinking. This is about education, so he talks about that a few times. Innovation is also a key. We can't innovate anything if we don't know anything about it. And problem solving, he talks about, as we'll talk about here in a second. The chapter layout, first he defines the problem, and then he talks about teaching America. And then he likes to talk about the role of everybody in society when it comes to education. So the problem is, we're not as smart as we used to be, as much as we'd like to think. We went from being the top of the list to now to below average, and it's getting worse. Education, he says, is the key to economic growth. We can't produce things if we aren't smart enough to solve problems. So one of the first things he was talking about was students in America are now no longer geared to be the top dog. We're geared to have that $12 an hour job from day one. We're not geared to, we're not taught to work that 40 and 50 hour job, $40 and $50 an hour job right out of high school. We're not taught that anymore. It's all based on continuing our education, and no importance is been given on how we're doing to other people. As you see from that handout, we're low on every list, every aspect: math, reading, problem-solving skills. We're not. We used to be the top of the list. We're not anymore. When these results came out, there was no radio or TV or presidential statement saying, "Hey, we're last. We're in the middle. We're here," because we're not proud of it. We used to when these things came out. They used to do national or international studies. These things came out and said, "Hey, we're number one, and we're proud of it." And they would interrupt TV shows, radio broadcasts, and say, "We're number one," when we're not anymore. We don't place emphasis on it anymore. Some damaging statistics. 1 out of 3 first-year college students have to take a remedial course. It just means we're not teaching them the right way in high school. We're not showing kids the right way to do things. In public 2-year schools, it's 40%. 40% of students are taking 1 or more remedial classes. It also goes on to show that he talks about the statistics of people who have to take remedial classes are not graduating college. And like I said, we see this in critical thinking, reading, and math skills. The next part, he talks about teachers. We can't educate society if we don't have good teachers. We need to build an exceptional personnel system based on earned rewards. A lot of tenure has been given in the States. After 4 years, automatic tenure, you're good to go. So a lot of bad teachers are sticking around. Colorado has actually passed a bill a while ago that you're no longer going to be tenured after 4 years of service. You're going to be tenured on how well your students do. So if your students do well in 3 years, you're tenured, and that's not for life. So if you have 2 successive years where you're not sufficient in testing scores, then you don't have tenure anymore. You're back to a 1-year contract. He kind of wraps it up in one paragraph and says, bad teachers make it worse. Good teachers make things mediocre, and great teachers make a change. There's about 15% of teachers out there right now that are great teachers. He says good teachers take up a good bit of, about 60%, and the rest are terrible teachers that are just stuck in tenure. Some fun statistics. Students in the 85th percentile and above earn about 13 to 20% more than the rest of students in a lifetime. That amounts to $150,000 to $230,000 in their life. Doing a little simple math, a teacher can add $20,000 to your life in 1 year's teaching. So if a teacher has 20 students, that's $400,000 in economic value that teacher can either increase or decrease. So if you've got a bad teacher, she can decrease the economy by $400,000 a year. Or you've got a great teacher, she can increase your economic value. He goes on the next part of the chapter and says, this isn't just the teacher's fault. It's a community-wide effort. It's a whole country-wide effort. He breaks it down into communities, politicians, parents, students, businesses, and neighbors. They all have a role in the education in the society. Communities need to find ways to keep good teachers, because teachers are finding that there's no room to grow. They're getting in there. He was talking about one guy became a literacy teacher and loved it, was there for 3 years, and he was 27 years old, and he looked across the hall. There's a 62-year-old man still teaching literacy, and he'd been there for 40 years. So there's not room for growth. So people are leaving. There's no incentive to stay. So communities need to build an incentive to have these teachers stay. And one example he also talked about was the D.C. Public Education Fund. 662 all-star teachers in the area were given $10,000 just bonus, and on top of pay increases for being great teachers, for being in that top 15%. So DC is showing, hey, we want to thank you for teaching our America. Politicians need to become better teachers. We need to educate the country about the world we're living in. We're slowly declining. We're having more and more high school dropouts. We're having more and more students that aren't passing very, very easy classes. So politicians are kind of hiding behind this. They're not coming out to the public and saying, hey, we have a problem. We need to solve it. And actually, education is one of the first things funding is cut, because hey, why not cut it where we can? And that's the way politicians have been saying it. In Colorado, like I said, Colorado has taken the initiative to pass bills to make education come first over other aspects. Neighbors. You all know it. People spend hours and hours and hours searching into real estate so their kids go to the best schools. Well, it's not the best schools we should be worried about. It's the best teachers we need to be worried about. Every school has a bad teacher or two, or the whole school is like I went to. So communities need to invest in their schools. They need to, even if their kids aren't there. Funding is very little. So if we can have people, neighbors, invest in these schools, we might be able to provide incentives for these teachers to stay. Parents need to get involved. We can't just blame the teachers and the politicians like we want to. It's a lot of the parents too. They need to get involved. They need to push their children to do better. We're seeing more and more parents who could care less. Also, as I mentioned before, they need to find good teachers, not just good schools. So yeah, they've got the prestigious name, but hey, do they have good teachers? Are they teaching you the right things in the right way? And students, we can't blame everybody, right? So students need to take responsibility as well. They need to push their own selves to new heights. They need to come to learn, not to text. So he was talking about that in there. Students are going to school for the wrong reasons. They need to study more and less video games. So another thing he brought out. And they need to innovate new ideas and go with it. A lot of students are afraid of failure. So they'll think up an idea and say, hey, that's pretty stupid, and I'm not going to go with it anymore. So he says, go with your ideas and create with it. And businesses need to set higher standards for employees. He said a lot of businesses are taking cheap labor because the labor force is just not educated. So if employees can raise their standards, we can force students and everybody to continue their education so they can get the better jobs. They also need to give higher education incentives, like paying for your school, if that's an option. And they also need to give money to schools in their community, same as their neighbors. And that about sums it up.